Serious, what is the creepiest thing you don't talk about in your profession? I'm a mailman, and sometimes people's houses just creep me out. Sometimes you walk up to a really run-down place with their mailbox hanging sideways and you just get a bad feeling like bad things happen here. It's also creepy how bad some people's houses smell, and I can smell that crap from outside. If you're a hoarder with 20 cats, I can smell all the cat pee and sweet rotting smell as soon as I go up your walkway. Also, delivering mail to sketchy businesses that are clearly fronts for something else is never really fun. Can make you pretty uneasy. Houses apparently reek like cat pee. Some of those cat hoarders may instead have a bunch of stoves in their garage cooking up some In the work comp insurance industry, each body part has a predetermined monetary value. So if you lost, say, a thumb or a foot on the job, they just check their price list and cut a check. Sometimes there are different values for the same body part depending on if the part that was lost came from your dominant hand or side. Another fun fact is that it can be cheaper to insure roofers who work on 5 or 10 plus story jobs than those that work on lower structures, because the insurance companies figure in the event of a fall they'll only have to cut a simple check for a pre-set death benefit for the high-rise workers. It's when someone falls from just a couple stories that leads to years of expensive medical treatments and disability payments, since they're much more likely to survive. I've always found it a little bit creepy how easily our lives and body parts can be reduced to just a few numbers and dollar signs. I run pools. We make sure our swimming instructors have good training in spotting the signs of child abuse, because we see so much more of your kid's body than most other folks in their lives. Bathing suits don't do much to cover up suspicious bruising. Likewise in dentistry, we check for bruising in children's throats. Sick world. Honestly, the fact that most stuff we deal with causes cancer. Generally, you can be quite safe as a chemist, but it's the long-term exposure that's an issue. Being somewhat not safe over time causes lots of issues. Sure, you always hear of someone who got a liter of solvent to the face, or got a toxic powder on their arm and was fine, but it's the sum of all your exposures, not the day-to-day stuff that kills you. Be smart and be safe, wear gloves, wear a lab coat, don't breath anything in, and work in a fume hood with everything. Lab safety is paramount. The little things adding up is what'll get you for sure. Anyways, I gotta wash my hands with benzene before I leave the lab. See ya. The amount of dead bodies you have to deal with walking on. Property management for 5 communities with 2,400 people. 95% college students, 60% of those in high stress, high octane majors. I've walked into 4 suicides in 5 months, and these have been people I've gotten to know. 2 RAD, worked with to cater to interests. I couldn't imagine it was going to be like this, but I probably should. IDK how to fix any of it, but it makes for a hard time now and again. I worked in property management for 6 years and never found a dead body. Finding a resident dead was one of my biggest fears. Sorry you had to experience so much of that. The fact that human organs are shipped like regular packages at FedEx. I see them almost every day. It's most a company called CryLife, I think. It's for organ donation. But we are very professional and careful with these packages, in particular for obvious reasons. I did the holiday temp thing at FedEx a few years ago, and one of first deliveries one day was a bunch of human freaking hearts, and I just was not prepared for that. I work for a company that, amongst other services, provides carpet cleaning. Vacuuming is one of the easiest corners for janitorial providers to cut, so it rarely ever gets done to adequate levels. This means that office carpeting is absolutely filled with dirt, skin flakes, and literally any other nasty tiny thing you can picture. Carpeting is like a sponge filter, and if you don't clean it out regularly it gets freaking nasty and can majorly impact indoor air quality. Sick building syndrome can be caused by carpeting alone. Also, people in general are nasty too. In one night, in one facility, my team cleaned up pee, vomit, and blood stains on the carpet. Wearing PPE of course. The amount of skid marks we clean off office chairs is bonkers too. I wish I never knew this, but I was a hairdresser for a while, and at one point was working in a not so good area. I had just started at this new salon, and the owner warned me to watch out for an older man who would come in after a young girl. That in and of itself was kind of strange, but nothing too jarring. It's also important that we had almost no staff. Do I work many 6-7 hour shifts by myself? Well, one day a young woman, maybe 25 years old, came in, and an older man behind her, who said absolutely nothing. I took her to the chair, and like everyone else, asked her what she wanted. She pulled me close to her and said, "That man there thinks I'm getting my head shaved. He gave me $100, but just trim it." I looked back at the man, and there he was, starting to masturbate in the corner. I told him to leave and called the police. The girl started crying in the chair. It was by far the creepiest thing I've seen. I never knew people had fetishes like that. I wish I never knew. I drive trains. Statistically speaking, a driver in my country will drive over 2 humans during a career. What really haunts you is the sound. It's a loud thud. I don't know about creepy, but a lot of dietitians have had eating disorders. It can attract people who are 1. Obsessed with food and health, and 2. Looking for better ways of staying as thin as possible. On a similar note, I studied psychology, and every therapist I've met had some sort of mental illness. But really it makes sense that people would want to go into a field that they are personally invested in. The amount of suicide among doctors. Physicians have among the highest rates of suicide worldwide, but I didn't understand how significant it was until I was in the field. I assumed it wasn't a big issue. The career seemed great with prestige, high job security and income. And it is great, but I didn't know about working 60 days in a row, operating after being awake for 72 hours on call, cutthroat competition and training bottlenecks, the constant expectation and pressure to be the best and know it all from seniors and patients alike, the harassment and bullying from colleges that eat their young. Now that I'm working in hospital networks, I don't go more than a couple of months without hearing about another doctor who attempted or committed suicide. There is more open discussion about the crisis, but most remains unspoken. Many doctors in my country won't disclose or seek help for their mental health problems out of fear they'll be reported and have restrictions on their license. And if you are taken to hospital for the suicide attempt, the field is small enough that your colleagues and friends will hear about it, no matter how much staff maintain confidentiality. I visited a friend in Aiku who attempted suicide, and he was mortified that he had been transported to the hospital he was employed in. Everyone knew, and he moved across the country. And you hear about funerals for an untimely passing of a 30-something-year-old doctor, while nobody talks about how or why they died. We are very uncomfortable talking about suicide. The number of deaths and injuries. Industrial maintenance isn't a really safe career path. I personally know 4 people that have been seriously injured and 2 that were killed on the job. I spent 30 minutes in an aluminum refinery once. It was pretty terrifying. Guy showing me around told me how if a fairly insignificant amount of water or moisture got into one of the enormous vats of liquid, it would essentially erupt like a volcano. I was ready to leave after that. The amount of suicide rates in the veterinary profession. 8 years after graduation and 2 of my classmates have committed suicide. High stress, not fantastic pay, poor coping mechanism, bad clients, etc. will wear anyone down after a time. Sometimes when we deliver a stillborn baby that passed a while ago, the head may come off in delivery. Fortunately, it usually doesn't. IT security at a lot of places is a joke. You'd be horrified how at some high profile hold a lot of your personal data there isn't really an emphasis on security. Sure, they do just enough, but it's more aimed at protecting their image and whatnot. That's your data. I work in a software security company. Absolutely no one I work with was surprised by what Snowden revealed. Mostly we were surprised it wasn't common knowledge. The smell of burning human flesh. I'm an industrial welder and occasionally have a molten blob of steel land on exposed skin. We don't mention it outside of work because of obvious reasons. I have a bunch of scars on my right forearm from welding burns that several doctors have accused me of being an IV drug user because of. Trucker here. Rape by trainers, particularly men, on female trainees is kind of an issue that has only really started to come to light. Holy crap, that's a pretty crazy thing to never talk about. Not really creepy, but I work at a woodshop, and it is an absolute OSHA disaster. Safety guidelines are rarely, if ever, enforced, and corners are cut constantly to get stuff built on time. I'm talking fire extinguishers buried behind scrap wood and other things, almost zero use of safety equipment, and just a general disregard for what should be standard practice. Really the only reason injuries are rare is because the vast majority of people who work here are experienced and know their crap. A small percentage of people getting tattooed have HIV, AIDS, hepatitis, etc., and they are not always honest on their release forms. I was taught to always treat every client as if they have hepatitis C, so everyone gets the same precautions, safety measures, and equipment sterilization. It's tough though, because we'll have sketchy people that probably use drugs, or come in wanting their house party tattoo fixed and we have no idea if they were sharing needles. We either make a judgment and deny them service, or treat them like everyone else and use precaution. I've only had one person be honest and tell me they had HIV while they filled out their paperwork. Work 10 PM to 8 AM shift at a gas station. The number of construction guys, factory workers, big truck drivers, basically heavy machinery guys who buy 2 pints of vodka, one for each pocket, every morning at 6 AM in their way to work is quite scary. I work for a student loan company. A lot of people's repayment plan is to pay the absolute minimum, defer their loans as long as possible and then die. It's usually for older people, but I see it with folks in their 20s 30s also. Their interest is sometimes more than they make in a month. I can't tell you how many people I've had to reassure that their kids won't have to pay the loan if the parent dies. It usually can't be discharged with bankruptcy either. It freaking sucks that death is the only way out for people. We literally have to have a protocol for how to handle someone threatening to commit suicide so they don't have to pay it. That's my plan. I make crap money and am on an income-based repayment. I will literally never ever pay off my full loan. Thankfully my repayment plan includes it ending after 25 years of payment. Military. A lot of people I served with were really freaking dumb, including officers. Also, cancer rates among retirees are insanely high. I work in TV news and some viewers can be very creepy. People subconsciously feel like they know us because they see us every day in their homes. Some of the mail my co-workers receive is so questionable. Like one guy, a well-known and beloved weatherman, regularly gets postcards from the same dude that hates him and berates him. Another guy acts as if he actually knows one of our weekend anchors, in his letters talking about how they used to go to various concerts together. Nope. Once I opened a package with all these random objects, band-aids, Lay's, a pair of socks, conversation hearts, and 5 valentines each detailing how the person would storm the building. Once I did a story vaguely related to vaping and within minutes a guy tracked down my personal Facebook and sent me 3 videos cussing me out and a long rant about how I was a PNW and a freaking moron. In education as an administrator, the reality of the frequency of child sexual assault or child abuse and lasting trauma resulting from it is enough to make you drink. It is so shocking the level of incompetence in parents. This is across both private schools, well-off demographics and high needs, high poverty districts. It is really hard to come to school each day and mask positivity some days. This isn't necessarily creepy, but unsettling. I used to work in the travel industry. You'd be surprised at how many people seriously injure themselves or even die while on vacation. People tend to think they're invincible when they're abroad. Spoiler alert, you are not. Buy travel insurance. Here's a small sampling of what I can say about the legal profession. Personal injury attorneys who advertise are typically good businessmen and terrible attorneys. They will do a great job negotiating with the insurance company, but can't litigate a case to save their life. Home cooking is a real thing. You are generally better off hiring an attorney who regularly practices in a certain circuit or district than hiring someone your friends recommend that would be considered an out-of-town attorney. The suicide rate among attorneys is incredible. The rate of drug and alcohol abuse is terrifying. This is what happens where you work in an adversarial environment with no formal mentoring programs and are forced to work 80+ hours a week to keep your law firm partners happy or have to take cases you don't know how to handle just to afford to. Keep your doors open as a solo small firm attorney. I had been in practice less than 3 years before the first of my classmates OD'd. Many solo small firm mid-firm attorneys can't afford to retire. They have to work until they die. You'll see attorneys in court that can barely walk, but they keep taking cases so they can afford to live. It's very sad. The money isn't there like people think. My first 3 years of practice I made less than $35k per year. I was in practice for 6 years before I made more than $50k gross in a single year. And I was not some sort of anomaly. I had classmates who have been in practice over 10 years and still make less than $50k a year. I work in an eco-friendly importer who imports, well, eco-friendly products that replace disposable or single-use products, especially plastics. The amount of plastic involved in production, shipping, storing, and packing those items is insane. It's just all stripped from the finished product before it lands in the customer's hands. There's also issues with ordering from abroad, everything from factory waste to the fuels to get it here. It's really, really sad, and nobody addresses it, ever. It's not talked about. We just strip off the plastic and toss it before shipping to the customer. Not really creepy but sad, and so very obviously ignored. It's amazing how packaged things are. It already feels wasteful in store, but the packaging that comes even before being sold is huge. For instance, in a lot of clothing stores each item comes wrapped individually in plastic. Such a massive waste. The way that some patients with mental health conditions, especially schizophrenia, try to explain what it's like having their condition. Things like I'm playing snakes and ladders but there are no ladders. Or when they explain their auditory or visual hallucinations to you. Those are usually pretty creepy too. But overall it's sad that some people live in those realities. The amount of teachers who sleep with students. Every school I've been at there has been a story of Mr. So-and-so got fired for having sex with one of the students a few years back. I've talked to teachers who make remarks about 15-year-old girls' bodies that would be embarrassing to retell. I've heard rumors of students who get a little unwanted attention from some teachers. Improper stuff happens far more than you hear about on the news. IDK if it's really creepy, but drug and alcohol use on the job in construction is a big issue that's almost never explicitly addressed in the industry. To keep up or relax a little during the day, some guys will use stimulants or drink on their breaks and lunch. And because max production is the goal on most jobs, it tends to be left alone until it causes problems. It's not nearly as widespread as it once was, but it's still a big problem, and the amount of supers and foremen, typically older guys, many of whom have done the same at some point in the past and will definitely know how to recognize it, who are willing to look the other way for the sake of production when one of their guys is taking pulls off Jameson, snorting lines, popping a Adderall in the parking lot on their breaks. Lunch is downright scary. Patients' perception of their doctors is almost entirely based on our people's skills communication, but this does not correlate very well to the quality of our medical decision making. The reality is that there is a huge range within the medical community as far as motivation to learn and improve, being up to date with the latest research, etc. And sometimes friendly doctors are terrible decision makers. Likewise, some have no people skills to speak of, but are some of the smartest and hardest working people on the planet. The best way to assess your doctor's decision making is to go off the recommendations of other doctors. But even that is not 100% reliable because a lot of us are hesitant to publicly criticize our colleagues. Some of the people who go missing in the woods just aren't found. We don't know what happens to them. Forest rangers are always wary about missing persons in the woods. A guy I knew in high school went missing over 10 years ago. They recently announced that they might have found his jawbone in the woods near his house. Not a big forest either, just some suburban woods between houses. There are things about my clients I know that I shouldn't. Some of them don't know that I know, and some of them know I know. Things unrelated to the job I provide for them. I'm a gardener. At least you never had to walk into murder as a result of this. That we've been hacked repeatedly. Any data you trusted us with is out there now, either for sale or just to freely download if you find the right site. The only reason your identity has not been stolen is that the thieves chose to steal someone else's today, and there are orders of magnitude more honest people than there are professional identity thieves. Pure random luck is the only reason your credit rating is not in tatters right now. None of this is publicized. because the laws were deliberately written in such a way that we decide what constitutes a breach, and that decision is never meaningfully accountable to anyone. So, surprise, we have never declared that any of the times that we were hacked constituted a formal breach. I work in a library and there is a hole on the first floor underneath a table. Someone dropped their AirPod down there once and one of my co-workers improvised a fishing hook with string and a magnet on the end. From an entire spool of string probably 30 feet or more, it never hit the bottom connected with anything metallic at that end. We have no idea where it goes. Oh wow, you should try to find the plans for the city or library. Maybe that would tell you something. Probably too late for anyone to read this, but I work for a social media influencer who everyone praises for keeping it real and being such a nice and lovely person. Reddit. She's a huge bully and a total psycho. What you see in her posts is so fake. It's scary to me that so many people look up to her and even say she has cured their depression or made them feel happy again. I'm glad that those people feel better about themselves, but this girl is not a good person and has contributed to the mental breakdown of more than one person. I wish people wouldn't believe everything they see on social media. It freaks me out how she's able to make herself look like such a sin when she's so nasty. Every influencer I've watched that comes across as super real and kind also gives me the controlling, bully behind the scenes vibe as well. There are two that I follow that I could totally see your description as fitting. Hospice nurse here. We can smell death coming. Also we can tell, with eerie accuracy, when. Every now and then we get surprised, but ultimately, we are able to tell what's up and arrange things so the family, if any, can be close by them. If they have no family, we stick close to them. Nobody deserves to feel alone at the end, but also, people tend to die when nobody's looking. We can leave the room for 3 minutes and not be surprised a bit if we find out PT has passed in that short window of time. Happens with family too. My great uncle asked his wife to go get him a cup of coffee. In the 2 minutes it took for her to do so, he passed. Some folks just don't want to be stared at as they die, and I don't blame them. The evening before my mom died, I got a call from the nurse asking me to come by because she had a feeling something was happening. I sat with mom for several hours, unconscious, and when I stepped out to use the restroom she was gone. My previous job was at a canine lodging training facility. The training was 0% positive reinforcement, only negative. One of my co-workers walked in on a trainer choking a dog out on a prong collar until it passed out. Trainer followed her out and said there's a reason why you don't go in the training room, like he was out of a mafia movie or some crap. SPCA was called on this place at least twice, but someone there is buddies with the owner and always gives him a heads up before they come investigate. Not as creepy, but anyone paying for a large run during the busy season will usually just end up with their dog in a carrier crate. People will still be charged nearly $100 a night for their dog to stay in a large run even if they're not actually ending up in there. All in all, I highly advise just hiring a dog sitter on Rover. Most upscale boarding kennels don't have maximum capacities and often lie cheat their clients of money. They don't actually read your dog a bedtime story, or give them doggy ice cream, or give them pamper tuck-ins. If you insist on bringing your dog to a boarding kennel, smaller is better. Don't let large upscale facilities fool you with the looks. It may look nicer, but 100% chance the rundown looking one is more honest and likely to cater to your dog's needs. Or look for one with cameras. Mine has cameras where you can see the dogs at all times on an app. All of us, including the biggest toughest ranchers, all have a baby voice they use when talking to livestock. Weird but totally adorable. A wholesome answer in a decidedly unwholesome thread. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.